He abandoned me at 6, then cleaned my office floor. I was 6 years old when my dad vanished. No goodbye, no phone calls, just a half-empty closet, and my mom crying in the kitchen at night like she thought I couldn't hear. Years passed. Poverty hardened into hunger. Hunger turned into obsession. I promised myself one thing: I would never need anyone again. By 32, I was CEO. A hostile takeover put a failing subsidiary under my control. New building, new staff, new faces. I walked the halls the first morning like a king inspecting conquered land. That's when I saw him. Older, thinner, greasy hair pulled back too tight, a janitor's uniform hanging off his body like it didn't even respect him. He laughed loudly with two women from accounting, hands lingering too long on their waists. Something about his voice made my stomach twist. I brushed it off. Coincidences happen. Weeks passed. I kept seeing him. Always flirting, always loud, always sloppy, and every time that same sick familiarity crawled up my spine. Then HR sent me a file. Background checks for legacy employees. I skimmed, name after name, until one stopped me cold. Same name, same birth year, same hometown. My hands started shaking. I pulled the old photo attached to the file. It was him. The man who left me to grow up hungry was mopping my floors, taking smoke breaks on my dime, bragging about women while working for the son he abandoned. He had no idea who I was. The next morning, I scheduled a private meeting, executive level. No HR, no witnesses. He walked in smiling, still not recognizing me. I closed the door. And that's when I decided I wasn't sure yet if I wanted revenge or if I wanted to tell him exactly who signs his paycheck. I didn't sleep the night after scheduling that meeting. Not because I was nervous, because I was deciding how much damage I was willing to do. By the time morning came, I already knew. Closure isn't quiet, it's violent. He walked into my office 10 minutes late, smelling like cheap cologne and cigarettes, smiling like we were equals. Like I was just another suit who happened to sit higher up the ladder. He dropped into the chair without being invited, started talking, complaining about his schedule, about how the women in accounting couldn't take a joke, about how management didn't appreciate loyalty. I let him talk. I watched the way he crossed his legs, the way he leaned back, the way he assumed the world owed him something. Then I slid the file across the desk. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes dropped to the name, his own name. I saw the confusion first, then irritation, then fear. He laughed and said there must be a mistake. I told him there wasn't. I told him I bought the company 3 months ago, that every paycheck he'd received since then came from me, that every floor he scrubbed, every trash bag he tied, every joke he told women half his age, all of it happened under my signature. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. Then I stood up, and I told him exactly who I was. Not dramatically, not angrily, clinically. I told him my age, my mother's name, the apartment we lived in after he disappeared, the nights she skipped meals so I could eat, the year I stopped expecting him to come back. His face drained of color. He tried to speak, tried to interrupt, tried to explain. I didn't let him. I told him I recognized his voice before his face, that I noticed the way he flirted with women like they existed to distract him from his own emptiness, that I watched him brag about nothing while cleaning the building owned by the son he abandoned. He cried, actually cried, hands shaking, voice cracking, calling me son like he'd earned the word. He said he made mistakes, that life was hard, that he always meant to come back. I told him I didn't invite him here for apologies. I told him I invited him here to fire him. I slid another paper across the desk. Termination. Effective immediately. No severance. No reference. I told him security would escort him out. That's when he snapped. He stood up too fast, raised his voice, said I couldn't do this, said blood meant something. I told him blood doesn't mean shit when it's spilled and left to dry. I told him he didn't lose his job today. He lost the illusion that abandoning someone doesn't come with interest. Security knocked. He begged. Not for forgiveness, for mercy. I looked at him one last time. The man who vanished when I was 6. The man who thought power was charm and survival was luck. The man who never once asked who signed his checks. I told him he could leave the building the same way he left my life, without looking back. They walked him out. I sat back down alone in that office. No relief, no triumph, just silence. And for the first time since I was a kid staring at an empty doorway, I didn't feel abandoned anymore. I felt finished. The meeting starts wrong immediately. He walks in late, doesn't apologize, and drops into the chair across from me like we're equals. He leans back, crosses his arms, and starts talking before I say a word. Complains about his schedule, about how long it takes to clean the executive floors, about how people can't take jokes anymore. He mentions women by name. He laughs at his own comments. He has no idea he's digging a hole and no instinct to stop. I let him finish because people like him always reveal themselves if you don't interrupt. When he's done, I slide the folder across the desk. He barely looks at it at first. Flips it open casually, expecting a warning or some HR nonsense. His expression changes halfway through the first page. He stops flipping, goes back, reads slower. His jaw tightens. He looks up and says, "There's a mistake." I tell him there isn't. He says he's been with this company for years and doesn't know who I think I am. I tell him ownership changed 3 months ago. I tell him the company he works for doesn't exist anymore in the way he remembers it. I tell him every department, every role, every employee now answers to me. That's when his posture changes. He sits forward, studies my face, actually studies it this time. He asks my name again, like he didn't hear it the first time. I tell him. Then I tell him my mother's name. Then I give him the address. That's all it takes. His mouth opens, then closes. He stares at me like he's waiting for someone to say, "This is a joke." When no one does, his breathing changes. Faster. Shallow. He whispers my name like saying it out loud might undo what's happening. I don't react. I tell him I reviewed the legacy staff when I took over. I tell him I noticed his behavior immediately. The complaints, the warnings, the fact that he keeps skating by because people see him as harmless. I tell him I recognized him before I confirmed it, and I let him keep working anyway. That's when he starts talking fast, apologizing, explaining, saying life got complicated, saying things didn't go how he planned, saying he never meant for things to turn out this way. He reaches for the desk like he expects me to meet him halfway. I don't. I tell him this isn't a reunion. I tell him this is a performance review. I list the complaints, harassment warnings, inappropriate behavior, verbal incidents that were documented but never enforced because management before me didn't want trouble. I tell him that under my leadership, trouble doesn't get ignored. It gets removed. I slide the termination notice across the desk. He stares at it like it's written in another language. He says I can't fire him like this. He says he deserves severance. He says he gave years to this place. I tell him tenure doesn't protect people who think rules are optional. I tell him his employment ends today, effective immediately. That's when he loses control. He stands up too fast, chair scraping loud against the floor. His voice rises. He says I'm doing this out of spite. He says this is revenge. He says blood matters. He says family matters. He says people will hear about this. I let him finish again. Then I tell him something he doesn't expect. I tell him firing him has nothing to do with who he is to me. I tell him if he were a stranger, he'd still be gone. I tell him his behavior alone earned this outcome. The rest just removed any hesitation. That hits harder than anger. He starts bargaining, asks for another position. Any position. Says he'll behave. Says he'll stay quiet. Says he'll disappear if I want. Says he needs the money. Says he doesn't have anything else. I tell him none of that is my problem. I tell him he had decades to take responsibility for his life and chose not to. I tell him he doesn't get rescued now, just because he finally understands who he's standing in front of. Security knocks. He turns toward the door, then back to me, panic setting in. He asks if I'm really going to do this. I tell him it's already done. When security enters, he tries one last angle. Says, people will talk. Says it'll look bad if word gets out. Says I'm making a mistake. I tell him the only mistake would have been letting him stay. They escort him out slowly. He keeps looking back, waiting for me to stop it, waiting for some last-minute mercy. It never comes. The door closes. I don't sit there reflecting. I don't feel relieved or guilty or victorious. I open the next file on my desk and move on. Because this wasn't revenge. It was just business. And for the first time in his life, he finally worked for someone who didn't let him get away with who he was.